Therapists, if you're looking to grow your private pay caseload, you'll want to check out Thrizer. Thrizer makes therapy more affordable for your clients up front, saving them on average 70% per session, all while you earn your full private pay rate. Check out join.thrizer.com/modern therapist to learn why thousands of therapists and clients are using Thrizer.
Since 2007, Buying Time has supported entrepreneurs and therapists on their admin, marketing, and bookkeeping needs, and so much more. Check out their free Buying Time Systems Inventory Checklist to uncover hidden expenses and optimize spending in your practice. Find that at buyingtimellc.com/MTSG.
You're listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide, where therapists live, breathe, and practice as human beings. To support you as a whole person and a therapist, here are your hosts, Curt and Katie Vernoy.
Welcome back, Modern Therapists. This is the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. I'm Curt with Katie Vernoy, and this is the podcast for therapists about the things that go on in our work and the things that go on in our field. And the economy has been all over the place. And one of the things that we talk about occasionally, and we've talked about historically, is ways about future-proofing your practice, ways that potentially working with insurances is something that people might want to consider. Or if you're already working with insurances and totally not happy with what that process is, we always like to invite some friends to help us out with some of the conversations that Katie and I are at least aware of, but don't necessarily have all of the expertise to be able to speak to ourselves. And we are joined today by Sanjana Sathya. She is the co-founder at Thrizer and very willing to spend some time talking about just the state of where things interacting with insurance are for us as mental health professionals. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Katie and Curt. This is a conversation I've really been looking forward to.
We've been looking forward to it as well. But before we get started, we want to ask you the question we ask all our guests, which is, who are you and what are you putting out into the world?
Yeah, I am Sanjana. I'm, as Curt mentioned, co-founder of Thrizer. We are an out-of-network billing service. But honestly, a big part of why I'm here today is I think that advocacy starts with education, right? Like a big part of what we're putting out into the world at Thrizer is how can clinicians better support themselves while still being accessible to their clients? And a lot of times, insurance, accepting insurance can feel like the obvious answer, but it may not work for everyone. It may work partially for some people, and maybe they want to incorporate private pay as a part of, supporting their income sources. So, I love having these conversations because there isn't a one size fits all for everyone, and really just talking about it, about the state of insurance, about, how super bills work and out-of-network benefits work, and just in general, right? What can we be kind of navigating when we're thinking about building a private practice? I love having these conversations because I feel like it goes in all different directions, and it's fun to kind of hear from the hosts and, what is most salient for your listeners. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm putting into the world.
So just to frame where you're coming from a little bit on this episode, Thrizer's been involved with this pretty important report that's been coming out.
Yes. So we have partnered with Beacon, media marketing on this really exciting report called the 2025 State of Mental Health Insurance and Marketing. What we did is that, at the end of 2024, we sent out a survey to a bunch of, hundreds of clinicians, therapists, and just mental health professionals on what is their current sentiment towards accepting insurance, the reimbursement rates that they're receiving across the board, what their ideal private pay rates might be, if that's different from their reimbursement rates within the in-network system, what clawbacks look like, what denials look like. It really kind of just a deep dive on, is insurance supporting them? And if they've decided to leave the insurance panels, why have they done so, right? And I think that the biggest takeaway from, we'll get into the data and stuff, but the biggest takeaway from all of this is that people have a lot to say, and there's just, a lot of conversation about this, and we just want to normalize. If there's any feelings towards or against insurance, we want to normalize those feelings, right? Because I think we can all acknowledge we're not in a perfect system right now. So, yeah.
So we'll link to that report in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. But what are the current stats on how many folks are taking insurance, the average pay, that kind of stuff? Like what are the big data points that are important for today's conversation?
We surveyed about 300, 400 clinicians to kind of understand where the current state of accepting insurance is. And of that, just to kind of level set on the sample size, just because I know we get questions around that, is about 80% of them are solo practitioners. So it is more heavily leaned towards the smaller practices, kind of across the mental health spectrum in terms of professional counselors, LMHCs, or LMFTs, kind of just across the board in terms of the type of clinicians that we've surveyed. And what we've seen is that, kind of looking at the numbers, only 8%, at least of this sample size, are fully insurance-based, which was very interesting for me to see. 32% are entirely private pay, and 60%, kind of that middle chunk, are part private pay and then part insurance-based. And that's actually really interesting. We'll kind of dive into that middle segment because I feel like that's where there's so much to learn from. But that's the stats we've seen in terms of just the breakdown of our clinician, base. In terms of the survey size, average reimbursement rate, or kind of the pay that we've seen within in-network, is about $112 a session. And so, obviously there'll be some insurances that pay a little less, some that pay a little bit more, but across the board, the average we've heard is about $112 or $110. Compare that to, we also asked this question that was, what is your ideal private pay rate? Let's say you switch into fully private pay. What would you want to charge your clients that you think is fair and supports your well-being and financial goals? It was between the 180 to 200 per session range, right? So if you look at that, insurance reimbursement rates are about 60% of what clinicians or therapists feel like is fair and supports their work, their well-being, their financial goals. And that's kind of the biggest takeaway from all of this, right? We're within the insurance system. We want to talk about how, the entire system can support clinicians. And we also asked this question that was, overall, if you're accepting insurance today, do you think it's worth it? And 47% of the people said, no, it's not worth it. So only half of them said it is supporting their goals. So yeah, those are kind of the top of mind stats that come to me of the current state of insurance. And of course, we have a lot more data on, how clawbacks look, how denials look, why people left to go to private pay, all of that. But that's kind of the level setting of this entire conversation in the report.
What are people saying are the advantages of doing insurance either fully or part of their practice towards their goals?
If we look at the pros of kind of what people are saying in terms of accepting insurance, the biggest one that comes up is accessibility, right? I think therapists come into this field to be able to offer services to people in need. It becomes kind of this ethical question of, if I'm not able to be accessible to the people I want to serve, am I making the level of impact that I want to be making, right? So accessibility ends up being the biggest reason why people tend to stay in network. Another source is also easier client acquisition, just purely from a business perspective, right? If you're running a private practice, you don't have to worry as much about marketing. The insurance panels are doing the marketing for you. A lot of times, the first line of order is that clients will hop onto their insurance portal. They'll see, okay, who's in network? I want to find a therapist. Let me just go to Aetna and find who is in my location and who kind of fits what I'm looking for, right? So from a client acquisition perspective, especially because clinicians don't want to focus on marketing and, all these other things, they want to focus on providing care. So from a client acquisition perspective, it definitely is a huge pro. Because of that client acquisition, the other aspect is a more predictable volume, right? Of course, we can talk about caseloads being large, but it is predictable. There's not as much seasonality, right? As long as they have the insurance benefits, they're paying a pretty small copay in terms of the clients. And, it's more predictable in terms of what is my volume going to look like as a practice versus private pay becomes a little bit more difficult.
I know for myself that when I was in network, that was definitely my experience, that there was a lot of, if somebody called and I was on their panel, they were my client. And it was very easy and you can predict. And I think that can be very appealing to a lot of folks, especially in the current economy. But there's also cons, and I think that's something that might be important to go into as well, because I moved out of network because of things like clawbacks and insurance making mistakes and the very long calls and all those types of things. What did you find in your research around why folks either didn't like taking insurance or were getting off insurance panels?
Yeah, the three biggest reasons were, one, reimbursement rates, right? They felt like the reimbursement rates were not supporting what their goals were, and it just wasn't fair, right? Like they're not getting paid a fair, reasonable rate for the services they're providing. Two, and this is kind of the top two, were reimbursement rates and admin and paperwork and just dealing with insurance, right? To your point, Katie, needing to even figure out, okay, how do I do the paperwork to submit claims to insurance? How long am I waiting to get the reimbursements, right? And then even after doing those two things, of course, and before that, it's getting paneled with insurance, which is a whole process. But even after submitting claims, what we actually saw is that we kind of asked our respondents, we were like, hey, so what percentage of your claims have been denied, right, in the past 1 year? And we found that 1 in 2 clinician has experienced a claim denial. So 50% have at least experienced one claim denial, right? And then if you look at the volume of claim denials, most of them are saying it's between 1 to 5% and then 5 to 10% in terms of the volume of claims that have been denied. And that's not a very, if you're looking at a system where 1 in 2 people are going to get a claim denial, it's not a very supportive system, right? And then if you look at clawback, 1 in 4 people had clawbacks in the past 365 days. And so those are kind of the reasons that we're seeing that, folks are choosing to leave insurance panels or, just accept a few insurances instead of being paneled with everyone. On top of that, those are kind of the big reasons. Another reason that came up, which was kind of number 3 in the list, was clinical autonomy and privacy. So that was a big part of it. They felt like there was just a lot of hoops and hurdles in terms of documentation and notes and, needing to submit all that paperwork and even assigning diagnosis codes when they didn't really feel like it was necessary or wanted to for insurance reimbursement. So those are kind of the other things. And, other things that came up was also just all of this leading to burnout. And burnout was cited as another reason. So those are kind of the cons that we're seeing of accepting insurance. And yeah, it's just kind of, I feel like it's been normalized and accepted within the system, but it is something that needs to be questioned and talked about.
Well, and I think the big thing there that's really challenging to me is that you can do quote unquote everything right.
Yeah.
And still get either clawbacks or errors or those kinds of things. I've had, even when I moved out of network, I started getting, errors with clients who are trying to get out of network benefits. Like insurance companies are a little bit of a mess. And so it's frustrating. When it works, it's amazing, especially if the rates are reasonable. That it can be very amazing because you don't have to market. You can just see clients. You can focus on that effort. But when the insurance panels are really awful, both in rates and accuracy and fairness, it's just a whole other battle to fight. And so it's something we're making sure to be able to assess those things within, whatever panels you're on or those kinds of things can be really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Therapists. If you're looking to attract private pay clients, Thrizer is the tool you need. Thrizer helps clients successfully navigate their out-of-network benefits to save on therapy upfront, and you still get your full private pay rate. Chances are you're already familiar with superbills, so how is Thrizer different? Superbills can be extremely overwhelming for clients to navigate, and Thrizer is transforming the process to be much simpler.
Here's how. First, clients can instantly verify their out-of-network coverage with Thrizer's free benefits calculator. Then, Thrizer takes care of submitting claims, no more super bills, and dealing with all of the insurance stress. But what truly sets them apart is Thrizer Pay, the option for clients to just pay a copay for sessions instead of waiting 6+ weeks for a reimbursement check. They even cover the rest of the therapist rate to make you whole up front and then wait for the reimbursement on the client's behalf.
This isn't too good to be true. Thousands of clients and clinicians are already using Thrizer to make the therapy process more seamless and accessible. Check them out at join.thrizer.com/modern therapist and use the code Modern Therapists to enjoy waived credit card fees for your first $2,500 in charges.
I know in our therapist communities, we tend to see the worst examples of people facing clawbacks, companies coming back for years and thousands of dollars. What kinds of things do you end up seeing clinicians talking about when it comes to clawbacks?
We asked this question too. We were like, do you know why you got a clawback, or do you know what the claim denial reason was? And honestly, insurance isn't transparent about that. They use a bunch of gibberish language that says something along the lines of, oh, like, need further documentation, or, not able to justify needing continual care, or some random like phrases like that. That make
and they also have phrases like 07721 and then
yeah,
and then a word that doesn't make any sense.
exactly. And so it's a completely not a transparent process, it's a complete black box, honestly. And so I feel like my sense is a lot of people, and at Thrizer, we process out-of-network claims. So I imagine in-network is a whole other mess, right? But in
Sure.
network setting, in the out-of-network setting, we literally get claim denials that say this service wasn't reimbursed because it wasn't reimbursable. And it's like, okay, what is that? What is that exactly?
But why not?
But why? Tell me more. And it's a whole process to even find out why the claims were denied, or, clawbacks are happening. And so it can be really frustrating, especially when on the in-network side, as a clinician, you're not getting paid, right? You have no idea why, and you can't rely on that steady source of income that we were talking about. So
I think when people go out of network, they've decided that the nonsense that the insurance is doing, they go completely private pay typically.
Yeah.
And what did you see as far as the pros and cons of private pay, what's actually happening for clinicians who are private pay?
The reasons that I mentioned that, people have cited going private pay is, again, the higher reimbursement rate. So they can finally set and charge the rates that they feel is supportive of their well-being and goals and is fair to them, right? So that's the biggest pro of private pay. Again, greater clinical autonomy. If they want to provide super bills, of course, they will need to provide a diagnosis code. But if they feel like they don't want to, and a lot of clients prefer to don't want anything on their record and want to remain private in terms of mental health conditions, they don't have to, right? Like they don't need to assign any diagnosis codes and things like that. And then the trickle effect of not needing to deal with admin work and being able to charge what you want automatically leads to less burnout. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're hearing, right? And to your point, Katie, a lot of people start insurance-based, and that's what we've seen, right? A lot of people start insurance-based and then they decide to go private pay. Like, it's because they've tried to deal with it and it just didn't work for them. And so, yeah, the pros that we're seeing is just less admin work, setting the rates that they want, more clinical autonomy, less burnout. But on the flip side, of course, there are cons, absolutely. And that is kind of the direct opposite of the pros of being in network, right? Much more focus on needing to market yourself, right? You will be spending time on marketing, whether that's SEO or hiring a coach or blogging or putting paid ads out or, networking more and focusing on referrals, things like that. You do have those aspects that you would need to focus on more as a private pay practice. And of course, then that could lead to more unpredictability in terms of your volume, right? Maybe you really focus on growth and maybe the economy is doing great and people are able to afford your private pay rates. Your private practice is booming versus on the flip side, let's say you are not focusing on marketing as much and the economy isn't doing great, then, maybe you aren't seeing the steady source of income that you would be receiving in network. And we'll talk about this in terms of like, how do you mitigate the risks? But that's why I think my strong hunch is the reason 60% of this population of the survey respondents were in that middle category of hybrid. There's a reason for that, right? It doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be I'm fully insurance-based or I'm fully private pay. There's a lot of benefit of being in that hybrid middle section, and we can talk about what those benefits are. But that's kind of where we're seeing, I think, a lot of people leaning towards because both sides aren't perfect.
Well, and one thing that I remember reading in the report is that folks would like to have a fee of $180 to $200. What is actually happening?
Yeah, so the average rate that they are charging if they're a private pay therapist is $175. And so that's the average that we've seen. So and the most common rate is $150, right? And so even if they do feel like, they can charge more and their desired rate is higher, you're right, they are undercutting still and charging $150 to $175.
So there's not a magical button here that says, hey, do this and you'll get to make as much as you want. There's really a lot of work regardless of the choices that you make.
Yes.
You had mentioned about mitigating some of the risks that go along with this. What are some of the ways that people can mitigate some of these risks?
Great question. And I think I'm most excited to share about is the biggest takeaway for me from the report is we're in an imperfect system. The answer is somewhere in the middle, right? Until we can get to a place where insurance companies are paying clinicians a reasonable and fair rate for everyone, and clients are able to pay a reasonable and fair rate and something they can afford, we're going to be operating in this mess, right? And so the best thing I can say is that hybrid approach. And what does a hybrid approach look like, right? It is, one, picking a few insurance panels you want to be a part of, right? So whether that's Medicaid and Medicare, right, because they don't have out-of-network benefits, or they're the people, within that population who have the least resources to access, whatever that might be, or it might be an insurance company that is the biggest in your location, right? Like they're Aetna hubs, they're Cigna hubs, right? Like figure out what that big hub is so that you're able to be accessible to most of your clients in your region, right? So picking a couple of insurance panels, and again, this is, not me advocating you should accept insurance, right? This is just if you feel like you want to try a few things out, a hybrid approach could look like you accept a few insurances. Then there's a subset of people who have out-of-network benefits, right? And so they're the people with great PPO plans for insurances that you aren't paneled with, POS plans, and other plans that do have great out-of-network benefits, and you offer super bills to them, right? And that way, you're still getting your full rate, and they are getting back 50% or more of your session cost. And so that's a great middle ground for them. And then finally, you might have those subset of clients that don't have insurance or don't have great insurances or have huge deductibles, even in the in-network setting and things like that. And maybe you offer a sliding scale, right, for a few of those clients. Again, the ratio of these three buckets is completely up to you, right? It's up to what are your goals? Where do you feel comfortable? What do you think is fair to yourself and to your clients? Why did you get into this field? Like, is it supportive of that bigger mission that you had coming into it? And that is kind of the hybrid approach that, we've seen from the report is that's what I've been trying to do after years of trial and error. That's where I've landed, right? And that seems to be something I can sit well with and I feel good about. So that's kind of what we're seeing.
And that's something we've talked about in other episodes. We'll link to those over in the show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. And I think what you're saying really makes sense. It's looking at what makes the most sense as far as your location, what insurance are they taking? It could be if you have a particular niche or group of folks that you're seeing, what insurance do they take?
Yep.
And the other element of it is really doing the math on how many clients can you see in network versus out of network versus private pay and all of those things. And so we have longer conversations about those in the show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. However, I know for myself when I've gone out of network for any type of services and I've gotten a super bill, it doesn't always work. And so it's a pain in the rear. I'll say rear so we don't have to put explicit on this one. It's a pain in the rear. And I know for myself, there's maybe a 1 in 3 chance I'll get reimbursement from it. And so to me, I appreciate the super bill idea because I think it does give clients some opportunity. But I've actually gone to doing courtesy billing out of network because I think that that's something that's way more feasible. And I'll just, maybe I'm stepping over what you're going to say next, but that's one of the ways that I try to provide access and make sure that clients are actually getting reimbursement so that they can continue to come see me, even if the economy is going up and down like it is right now.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about out-of-network billing?
This is a leading question, Katie. And
I know. And I have to,
it.
full disclosure, I am a client of Thrizer's, and I do have some clients, my therapy clients, and they're getting some out-of-network benefits. Yes, this is a leading question, but talk a little bit about what out-of-network billing is, because not all of our listeners know what that actually is, because they just think, oh, super bills. And then how that can help folks with this, because I think for me, that's been huge when I've been able to actually do courtesy billing for folks who potentially don't have the wherewithal to get their super bills actually reimbursed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm happy to kind of dive deep into this. So one thing I want to kind of address up front is courtesy billing can seem scary, right? It's like
Sure.
you've stepped out of the insurance world because you don't want to deal with insurance. And I think when folks are just hearing about courtesy billing, it can feel much more hands-on than it needs to be if you are using an out-of-network biller or out-of-network billing service, right? And so, I'd love to hear your experience with Thrizer too, but what we try to tell people with these out-of-network billing services, not just Thrizer, there are other ones out there as well, is it's very hands-off for you as a clinician, right? It's basically you click a button, everything happens in the back end, and these out-of-network billing services take care of 100% of the insurance burden and hassles that are presented with super bills. I like to say out-of-network benefits are great, but super bills suck. And there's a reason for that, because super bills are very archaic, right? Step number one is you request a super bill. A client who is already probably going through a lot and seeking services, the last thing they want to do is deal with insurance. So even submitting a super bill can feel very intimidating for clients, in terms of, where do I submit it? Do I go to my portal? Do I fax it in? Do I mail it in? Like, there's actually so many different processes depending on your specific insurance plan, right? So step one is already really intimidating. Step two is there's no way to track super bills. There's no online portal that says, we've received your super bill, we're working on your claim, and here's how much you're going to get back, right? There is complete lack of transparency in the entire process, which adds more to the frustration and uncertainty of, am I going to get paid back with my out-of-network benefits, right? And then next step is it might take 4 to 6 weeks if you're lucky to get back that reimbursement check, right? And so you've already fronted, if your therapist is charging you $200, but you might get back 100 of it, you've already fronted the 200. So if you're going to weekly sessions, you fronted 200, 200, 200, 200, likely for 6 sessions before receiving anything back from insurance. So you're out $1,200 and you haven't received anything back from insurance, right? And I am convinced all of this is on purpose, right? Insurance companies don't want you to rely on out-of-network benefits, and they've perpetuated that rhetoric. And that's why there's a lot of perceptions out there that, they're large deductibles, out-of-network benefits are not reliable, all of which is true. But there are companies that are experts in that and have really tried to figure out, how do we partner with insurance companies? How do we make sure that we are submitting claims in bulk? And of course, Thrizer, we've gone away with even doing reimbursement weights. We don't like reimbursement weights, and we just want you to pay a fee up front, and that's it. So I think that's where out-of-network billing can be really helpful. And I think the other part that I like to mention is, by helping your clients, you are helping your practice, right? If we're talking about a decision that can support your practice, incorporating out-of-network benefits into your website, incorporating out-of-network benefits into your intake process, right? I don't accept insurance, but you may have out-of-network benefits. I use a tool that can verify it for you instantly, and they'll take care of your claims, right? That is a great marketing tool. And we've seen a lot of people kind of lean on that with Thrizer or other companies, because they're able to say that. And then that automatically is like, they're still out of network, but I'm going to be supported by this clinician financially, right? And so that can actually be a great marketing tool that we've seen. So yeah, that's kind of why I would say, out-of-network billing services are low touch. They're not a lot of effort for clinicians, but they can be really great resources for clients and a great marketing tool as well for the practices.
When you hire Buying Time, you get an entire team of accountable, knowledgeable virtual assistants with different specialties. It's a pretty amazing one-stop shop for your business needs. And I should know, I've been a happy customer of Buying Time since 2015. Buying Time has helped me and other therapists with admin and client customer service, finances and bookkeeping, including sending out invoices and super bills, setting up automated systems to take care of clients during onboarding, marketing, including website, social media, blogs, and newsletters, and a whole lot more.
Buying Time believes in streamlining, efficiency, and being cost-effective. So they help you to regularly evaluate systems to make sure you're not paying for programs and platforms you don't need. And they've put together a free systems inventory checklist to help all of us to uncover hidden expenses and optimize spending in your practice. Go to buyingtimellc.com/MTSG to get your free checklist now. When it comes to this kind of extension of a practice, and for many people in smaller practices that are used to having their hands on every step of the way and a lot of DIY kinds of things, when it comes to handing over some of the responsibilities, when it comes to especially things like money, how do you encourage clinicians to look for reliable billers or reliable extensions of this in order to have kind of that lifeblood of the practice? How do you ensure that trust is there? What do you encourage clinicians to do with that?
The biggest thing is do your research and ask the tough questions, right? So firstly, for everything that you're considering, any service that you're considering, go to their resources, go to their website, talk to your peers. At this point, a lot of people are using these services. So you might have someone within your network who are, using one of these billing services and out-of-network services. Have those conversations. Once you've done a good level of research and talk to your peers, get on calls with every company that you are considering, right? Ask the tough questions. When am I going to get paid? How are claims submitted? If claims get denied, what assurances do you have in place, right? What does the process actually look like? And, what are the denial reasons and what are the denial rates, right? Like just these kind of questions, ask the tough questions. And any company that you are evaluating should be able to answer those questions for you. And that's kind of how you build trust. And of course, if you don't have anyone in your peer who is using a company that you are considering, you can always ask the company for referrals to, other clinicians who have been using that service for a while. So, we always have people who are like, oh, we haven't heard of Thrizer. We don't know anyone who's using it. Can we please get connected with people who've been using Thrizer? And we're always open to kind of linking people up and say, okay, this is the state you're in. This is the kind of, services you provide. Let's match you up with the right person who can give you their honest opinion and experience. Yeah, so I would say those are the big things. Do the research, ask the tough questions, ask for referrals, talk to your peers, and once you feel like it is something that supports your practice, move forward. And most of these places offer free trials, so you don't have to worry about losing money or any of that. You could try it out with a couple of clients and see if it works for you.
As a set point, so people have some ideas of what they might be hearing from other companies, what are Thrizer's clawback rates, denial rates, clean claims, that kind of stuff? Like, what are you seeing as far as that process? Because I can compare it kind of to my little, where I do some of my own out-of-network billing, and I do some through Thrizer, and then I also, some clients get super bills. So maybe if folks want information on that, put that up over in our Modern Therapist group, and I can give some feedback on that too. But what are Thrizer's rates on those, so that there's a set point for other folks to compare?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we say is, in terms of denials, once we check benefits that they have out-of-network benefits, the denial rates are very low, especially because, when we hear or get back a claim denial, it's usually because there's some error in terms of the submission or something like that happens, and we're able to correct it very quickly. So if you look at the actual rate of denials, it's less than 0.1% of our entire claim volume, right? On the flip side, what does happen, and I like to be very transparent about this, is insurance does not publish what the reimbursement rates are. So even using our instant benefits calculator will give you a directional sense until we hear back on the first claim, right? And unfortunately, that's just kind of how insurance is structured. Like we will be able to let you know for a client exactly what their deductible is, and we will be able to let you know what the coinsurance is. But the allowed amount, that number is not published in insurance plans, and they vary by individual client. And so we'll kind of give our best guess of, hey, similar plans have been reimbursed this in the past, and there will be variation on that. And we like to be very transparent about that. In the event that a clawback meaning the claim gets denied, there are no clawbacks in the out-of-network setting, right? Because the client is on the hook to pay for sessions.
That's
There
right.
are no clinician clawbacks, and that's an important distinction to be made. Clinicians are paid upfront. They get their rate upfront. Clients are the ones waiting for reimbursement. If a claim gets denied and, we've submitted it, and the client, we have this copay option where a client just has to pay a portion of, reduced rate. We cover the rest of the rate for the clinician and then wait for reimbursement on the client's behalf. If we've done that and a client has already paid a copay, we are not going to backcharge the client for that session. That's a strict policy that we have because we want it to be something they can rely on. For that claim denial, we will submit it to insurance. Again, we'll try to gather as much information on why the claim was denied. If we have reason to believe that moving forward, claims will continue to be denied, we will let the client know, hey, looks like, your insurance isn't honoring your out-of-network benefits. We will, you will be responsible for your full rate moving forward, but please contact your insurance and see if you can do something about it, right? Because we've tried our best, essentially. That's a safeguard that we always provide clients if they've submitted 10 claims and we haven't heard back on their, whether it's been approved or not, we're not going to back charge them if they've been denied, even all 10 claims. And so that's kind of the safeguards that we've built into the process. In terms of claim submissions, at this point, everything is fully automated, right? We integrate with clearinghouses. We have a very robust billing team that scours our claims, makes sure that everything is clean and submitted. We have a bunch of QA policies in check, and we make sure that every claim that goes out is accurate and want to make sure that it is using the right pieces of information and everything, and it's fully automated and sent directly to insurance. So I think those are kind of the big questions. Katie, did I miss anything in terms of the questions you had?
I think that's good. And we are running short on time. So I think it's important that we get to the last question we wanted to make sure to hit, which is there's a lot going on. So how can clinicians future-proof their practice?
Yeah. And I get this question a lot from clinicians who I speak to. And first of all, I think I wanted to mention this earlier is I think we need to offer, or clinicians need to offer themselves a lot of grace because everything's difficult right now. The world is tough, but also being a clinician in this world is very tough, and a therapist in this world is very tough. And as we kind of established with the whole insurance conversation, it isn't a perfect system. Even if you find a hybrid approach that works, it can feel like you're not doing enough. It can feel like you're not getting paid enough. And I think the system's just been built that way to make you feel that way. And it's really unfortunate. And hoping that we'll be able to find a solution. So given that context, like what can you do? Is one, of course, we've talked about the hybrid approach, right? Figure out what is it that you need to support yourself and your family? What is the right mix of insurance, private pay, sliding scale, whatever you want to offer looks like, so you're getting a steady stream and reliable stream of income. Two is a lot of therapists are now finding other sources of income to keep themselves and their revenue diversified, right? So whether that is offering group therapy and workshops, right? Whether that is offering seminars, whether that is, in terms of offering courses or doing podcasts, right? And clinical supervision, things like that do help kind of broaden the diversity of sources of income they're getting. That can feel a little bit more comfortable than relying entirely on your therapy sessions. And that's something that we've seen the trend go towards. And Katie, you probably know this much more in terms of a lot more people are investing in other side things that still bring them joy, right? And honestly, it might be great for them to get their story out. A lot of people are leaning into their social media pages and doing aligned sponsorships with companies that they're using or brands that they really find ethical and supportive of clinician goals. So that is another thing that we've seen a lot of people doing. 3 is, in general, a lot of clinicians are, leaning towards telehealth. And I think that intentional shift happened during, the pandemic. And that can really, reduce the burden and give you access to more clients, right? There are things like PsyPact for psychologists. So you get licensed in multiple states. Getting licensed in multiple states might be a good option in general in terms of being able to see a diversity of clients. Another thing that, that could be really helpful is just investing in learning about what's happening in terms of health policy and trends and things like that so you can get ahead of it. And then finally, it's just the last piece I like to end on is just giving yourself grace. There isn't a perfect thing to do right now. And the more we're able to, you've done all the right things in terms of diversifying your income, investing in tools. That's another thing that I like to mention. Finding tools that reduce your admin work. A lot of people are relying on tools like their EHRs that are doing much more. They generate super bills on their own now, right? And, investing in virtual assistants, for example, anything that can reduce the administrative burden can also be super helpful. So that was kind of all over the place, but the top of mind things that come to mind in terms of things that clinicians can do in this world.
Where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing to keep up with all of the updates and the wonderful things that you're putting out there?
Yep. So we are at Thrizer.com. So THRIZER.com. You'll kind of find everything that you need to learn more about us there. We're also offering, listeners of the Modern Therapist podcast a free trial if you're ever interested. You get waived credit card fees for your first $2,500 in charges if you want to try us out. And we're always more than happy to get on calls and kind of share how we can be helpful to your practice. So the website will be the best place to start.
And we will include links to that in our show notes over at mtsgpodcast.com. Follow us on our social media, join our Facebook group, the Modern Therapist Group, to continue on with these conversations. And until next time, I'm Curt Woodhelm with Katie Renoy and Sanjana Sathya.
Remember to check out Thrizer if you're a private pay therapist. Clients just pay a copay for your sessions while you earn your full private pay rate. They are transforming the out-of-network benefits process. No more super bills, no more reimbursement calls, and the best part, no more reimbursement waits. Check them out at join.thrizer.com/modern therapist.
Buying Time is a full-service virtual support agency that is standing by to support you in your practice. It's time for you to get out of the day-to-day and bring in someone you can trust who has the experience to help you with all of your business needs. And don't forget to go to buyingtimellc.com/MTSG for your free systems inventory checklist to get on the path to less expenses and more profit.
Thank you for listening to the Modern Therapist Survival Guide. Learn more about who we are and what we do at mtsgpodcast.com. You can also join us on Facebook and Twitter. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our episodes.